Hello, this is Mr. Smith with the Daily Participation for Academic Economics. Please click Resubmit and a text box will open up. Type 3 significant items for today's lesson. So the Federal Reserve, is it good or bad? And we talked a lot about its structure and the tools that it uses and so on. But obviously there are those that support it and those that are opposed to it. So let's go over some of the pros and cons for the Federal Reserve. It, first of all, has helped establish and secure a national currency. Prior to the Federal Reserve, there was over 30,000 currencies in the United States. That was during the free banking era. That dropped a lot after the National Banking Acts were passed during the Civil War. So it's a little bit of a misnomer to say there was a huge amount when the Federal Reserve was established in legislation and then its actual creation in 1912, 1913. But they did help stabilize and focus the country's attention on one type of currency. It does help protect small banks because it sets up a system of loans, a web of loans that helps secure smaller banks. That way, if lots of people come and run and pull out their money, either because they're panicked or because there was a disaster in town or whatever it might be, they can also get a loan from larger banks. They, medium size, that get loans from larger banks that get loans from the Federal Reserve. And so it helps create that loan system to protect small banks. It helps control inflation and deflation. We talked about some of the tools they use to keep the economy healthy, but also prevent inflation from happening. It also helps to represent America in its financial interest because, we often look at it as, and you'll see some of the criticisms, they're just looking out for banks, but we keep our money in banks. So the bank's interest is also our interest. It's a big disadvantage for the banking system to experience instability or to fail because we would also lose our money. And it also audits smaller banks and helps with corruption. It makes sure that regulations are followed, that banks aren't engaging in risky type of behavior, and so on. Some of the cons include that obviously a bank has never been listed in the Constitution. So this was a problem even when the first central bank was established, the first bank of the United States during the Washington administration. But that, of course, expired after a 20-year charter. Then a new one was established, the Second Bank of the United States, and that was challenged in court in the case McCulloch versus Maryland. The state of Maryland, of course, was more conservative-leaning. They didn't believe that the bank was constitutional, so they tried to tax it, and the Supreme Court ruled that the state government could not tax a federal entity and that the bank was indeed constitutional because Congress has power over commerce or trade, and banks help ensure that. So that has already been ruled on, but there's obviously still people that disagree with that. It does make the government larger, kind of. It really is a hybrid organization. It's established by an act of Congress. Its leadership is appointed by the president and approved by the Senate. But really, most of it is in the private sector. So it does make the government larger, but not nearly as big of an increase as other departments that actually exist within the executive branch. While it is a government institution, it is still run by an individual, and that's a little bit of a misnomer too. I mean, there is a federal chairperson, but they are just one voting member in its leadership team, and it's not really one person. It's actually many different banks, nationally chartered banks, that compete with each other. But they are just looking out for the best interest of the country financially. And then it's often cozier with private interests than public interest. That's true. It is one thing liberals or Democrats are often upset about. But it's meant to look out for the financial sector and all of our financial interests too, which are private. They are for profit. We as human beings are for profit. We work, we earn money, we save it, we put it in the bank, we want to earn interest. That is all for profit. And so it is all private sector interest. And so it's true, they're often cozier with private interests. They're often cozier with their fellow bankers. They're often cozier with the rich people because all those institutions use money. And the more money you have, obviously, the better relationship and the better use you're going to get out of the Federal Reserve. It's just the way it works. The Federal Reserve looks over the financial sector. If you have lots of money, then obviously you have an even greater vested interest in making sure the banking system works. If you have no money, if you have $0, obviously the Federal Reserve doesn't have anything to do with you. So it's understandable. Some people would say, well, I don't care about this, and maybe it shouldn't exist because it doesn't help me. Well, there's a reason why it doesn't help you, because you don't have any money. So that is why some people get angry about it. Lobbyist influence policy equals corruption. That, some people say we should turn control of the Federal Reserve over to Congress, but that would be bad because you don't want the money supply changed based on people's emotions or what people believe, if they believe in conspiracy theories or stuff like that. Sometimes, especially members of the House can believe in those kind of things. So you don't want the money supply to be controlled that way. And on top of that, Congress is the one more likely to be lobbied by corporations and other types of institutions. So, do organizations and banks go to the Federal Reserve and say, hey, we want you to do this or that? Yes, but there's no proof, there's no evidence that they make those kinds of decisions. When they are going to change interest rates or buy securities, bonds, and sell them or whatever, or change the money supply, that's done transparently. What I mean by that is they release the information. We all know about it at the same time. And they're not influenced by politics, because the closed door meetings they have are meant to make sure they can't be influenced by lobbyists or politicians. Some people look at that negatively, say, oh, well, why are they having these closed door meetings? Well, it's not because they're evil monsters and they want to keep secrets. It's because they don't want to make decisions that are influenced by people that don't have knowledge about the economy or the actual money supply. And so there are concerns, are they audited enough? Probably not. I mean, that's one comment that's not listed on here, is that they themselves could be audited more often, and maybe there would be less conspiracy theories if members of Congress were able to go there and talk to people and sit through one of their meetings, as long as they're not tweeting while it's happening, and see exactly what they do and how they make their decisions.